In a viral interview that shocked the nation, a Ghanaian pastor sat down with a man named Stanley, who recounted a harrowing encounter that has become one of the most talked about stories of 2024. About 4 months ago, Stanley shared the terrifying events he and his friend experienced in a hotel room, involving a mysterious woman who turned out to be a ghost. This chilling tale captivated Ghanaians and remains a hot topic on social media. For those watching this video, many of you might already be familiar with Stanley's unsettling story. Stanley was a very busy man with a wife and 3 kids. Sometimes, when it got noisy at home, Stanley would go to sleep in a nearby hotel to get some rest. One night, the power went out at Stanley's house, so he decided to stay at the hotel. He called his friend, who had some work to do, and invited him to join him at the hotel. His friend agreed, because he also needed a quiet place to finish his project. Stanley and his friend wanted to watch TV in their hotel room, but they were having trouble connecting their laptop to the television. They were about to call the receptionist for help when there was a knock on the door. A very beautiful lady who claimed she worked at the hotel said she heard them talking and asking for help. Stanley's friend told Stanley to let her in, so they did. The lady tried to help them with the TV. While she was figuring out the problem, Stanley and his friend couldn't stop talking about how pretty she was. They were whispering among themselves, thinking she wouldn't hear them. To their surprise, the lady heard them. She turned around with a smile and said, "It seems like you love me, the way you're talking about me." Stanley and his friend felt a bit embarrassed, but decided to play along with the friendly joke. They laughed and admitted they found her attractive. The lady then asked them, "Do you wish to marry me?" Stanley and his friend were taken aback by her question, but continued the playful banter. Stanley claimed that since he paid for the hotel room, he should be the one to marry her. His friend, not wanting to be left out, insisted that he should marry her instead. Laughing, the lady said, "Then I will marry both of you." They all laughed, thinking it was just a joke. However, as the night progressed, things took an unexpected turn. The atmosphere in the room became more relaxed and intimate. The lady stayed with them, and in a surreal twist, the 3 of them ended up having sex that night. Before they would have sex, the lady told them not to let anyone know, explaining that hotel rules didn't permit staff to sleep with clients. She warned that if anyone found out, she would be fired. Stanley and his friend agreed to keep it a secret. After their intimate encounter, the lady excused herself to the bathroom. Stanley and his friend waited for more than 15 minutes, but she still hadn't come out. Growing concerned, they decided to check on her. They knocked on the bathroom door but received no response. Worried that something might have happened to her, they carefully opened the bathroom door. To their shock, they found the bathroom empty, but the shower was running, with water flowing freely. There was no sign of the lady anywhere. Stanley and his friend were bewildered and frightened. They had seen her go into the bathroom, yet she had vanished without a trace. They searched the room thoroughly, but found no evidence of her presence. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. The 2 friends were left standing in the hotel room, stunned and confused. They couldn't comprehend what had just happened. The beautiful lady, who seemed so real, had simply vanished. They turned off the shower and sat down, trying to make sense of the bizarre situation. Still in disbelief, Stanley and his friend decided to ask the other receptionist about the mysterious lady. They approached her cautiously and described the beautiful lady who had helped them with the TV. The receptionist looked puzzled and claimed she was the only lady working there that evening. Stanley and his friend exchanged worried glances. They pressed on, asking if she had seen the lady they described. The receptionist shook her head, insisting she hadn't seen anyone matching that description, fearing that telling the full truth might put the lady's job at risk if she were indeed a real human. Stanley and his friend decided to keep the details vague. Despite their initial decision to keep quiet, the strange encounter continued to weigh heavily on Stanley and his friend. They felt an overwhelming need to understand what had happened. Finally, they returned to the hotel and spoke to the receptionist again, explaining that they needed more answers. Seeing their distress, the receptionist directed them to the hotel manager. The manager welcomed them into his office and listened as they tried to explain their situation without revealing too much. He sensed their hesitation and assured them that he just wanted to help, urging them to tell him everything. Stanley and his friend insisted on knowing more about the mysterious lady first. The manager agreed to check the CCTV footage to see if they could find any clues. They all watched as the manager pulled up the footage from the previous night. In one of the clips, Stanley's friend was clearly seen standing outside the room, talking to the lady. But to their shock, the camera showed him standing alone, speaking to what seemed like thin air. The lady was nowhere to be seen. Panic began to set in as they checked all the CCTV footage from the evening. The lady was completely absent in every clip, despite Stanley and his friend vividly remembering her presence. They started to sweat, the fear and confusion intensifying with each passing moment. The manager, noticing their growing distress, tried to calm them down. "Are you sure you saw someone?" he asked, his voice steady but concerned. Stanley and his friend nodded vigorously, describing her in detail once more. The manager shook his head, baffled by the situation. "I don't know what to tell you. The cameras should have captured her if she was there." The gravity of their experience began to sink in deeper. They were sure of what they had seen, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Feeling cornered by the inexplicable nature of the events, Stanley and his friend finally decided to tell the manager everything that had happened, including the lady's warning about keeping their encounter a secret. The manager, noticing their growing distress, tried to calm them down. "Let me check something," he said, and went to his office, returning with a stack of old photographs. "We keep pictures of our staff and regular guests. Maybe you can identify her." Stanley and his friend watched anxiously as the manager went through the pictures one by one. Suddenly, Stanley's eyes widened. "That's her!" he exclaimed, pointing to a photograph. The woman in the picture was, indeed, the beautiful lady they had seen the previous night. However, her forehead was marked with a pen. The manager's face turned pale as he looked at the picture. He took a deep breath and said. The manager sighed and leaned back in his chair, looking more serious than ever. "Stanley, there's something you need to know about that room. The lady you saw, she used to work here, but she died over a year ago. She died in that very room where you and your friend lodged." Stanley felt a chill run down his spine. What happened to her? The manager took a deep breath. She was cleaning the room one day, slipped and hit her head on the floor. She died instantly. Since then, there have been reports of strange occurrences, but nothing as serious as what you and your friend experienced. It seems her spirit is trapped in that room. Stanley's friend couldn't handle the shock. He felt a cold shiver run down his spine, and before he knew it, he had urinated on himself out of sheer panic. His legs felt weak, and he struggled to process what he had just heard. The room fell into an eerie silence. Stanley and his friend realized they had spent the night with a ghost. The encounter, which had seemed so real, was now even more unsettling. They couldn't shake the image of her disappearing from the bathroom, the running shower, and now the confirmation that she had passed away. Seeing their distress, the manager tried to offer some comfort. The manager, seeing how shaken Stanley and his friend were, offered them a glimmer of hope. "I think you need spiritual help," he said, scribbling down a number on a piece of paper. "This is the contact of a pastor who has helped people with similar issues. Give him a call." Desperate for a solution, Stanley and his friend called the pastor and arranged to meet him. When they visited the pastor, they nervously recounted their eerie experience. The pastor listened intently, nodding as they spoke. "You've had an encounter with a restless spirit," he said. "These spirits can be very powerful and cling to the living. We need to perform a spiritual sanctification to cleanse you." The pastor requested a substantial amount of money for the ritual. Though it was a lot, Stanley and his friend agreed, hoping it would bring an end to their ordeal. The pastor performed the sanctification, praying over them and using various spiritual objects in the process. For a few days, things seemed to return to normal. But then, both Stanley and his friend started seeing the lady in their dreams again. Each time she appeared, she would seduce them, and in the dream, they would end up sleeping with her. The next morning, they would wake up urinating blood, a terrifying and alarming symptom. Distressed, they returned to the pastor for help. "Pastor, it's happening again," Stanley said, his voice trembling. "She keeps visiting us in our dreams, and we're urinating blood in the morning." The pastor listened and then said, "We may need to perform another, more powerful ritual, but it will cost more." Stanley and his friend exchanged worried glances. They had already spent a lot of money and felt unsure about paying more without guaranteed results. "We don't have more money," Stanley's friend said firmly. "We can't keep paying without knowing if this will end." Seeing their resolve, the pastor sighed but offered no further help without payment. Stanley and his friend left, feeling more desperate and fearful. That night, the lady visited them again in their dreams. This time, her tone was more menacing. "You are mine now," she declared. "Do not sleep with your wives or anyone else. If you try to have sex outside of our relationship, you will regret it." They woke up in a cold sweat, her words ringing in their ears. The fear of her threat left them feeling trapped and hopeless. Each day they grew more anxious and paranoid, unable to shake off the feeling that the lady was always watching them. Stanley and his friend decided to confide in each other about their dreams and the threats. They realized they needed to find another way to deal with this haunting presence. Seeking a solution beyond the pastor's help, they began researching other spiritual advisors, traditional healers, and methods to rid themselves of the ghostly lady who had claimed their lives. Stanley couldn't bring himself to tell his wife the truth about what was happening. Instead, he fabricated a story. "Honey, I need to focus on getting a promotion at work," he said, trying to sound convincing. "My spiritual father advised me to abstain from sex for a while to concentrate better." His wife, trusting and supportive, agreed. "If it will help you get that promotion, I understand," she said, giving him a reassuring smile. Meanwhile, Stanley's friend was struggling to cope with the ghost's torment. He confronted Stanley one evening. "Stanley, I can't bear this anymore. The dreams, the threats, the blood. It's too much. I'm going to Benin. They have powerful spiritualists there who can protect me from this ghost." Stanley hesitated, still skeptical and afraid of what might happen. "I don't think I can join you," he said. "I'm trying to handle this in my own way." His friend looked at him with a mix of pity and determination. "I hope you find peace, Stanley, but I need to do this for myself. I'll contact you when I'm back." After his friend returned from Benin, he seemed confident and relieved, believing he was now protected from the ghost. Stanley, the spiritualists in Benin are incredible. I feel free for the first time in months. You should have come with me." Stanley felt a pang of doubt, but remained firm in his decision. "I'm glad you found help," he said. "I'll consider it if things get worse." A few days later, Stanley was at home when his phone rang. It was his friend's wife, and she was in tears. "Stanley," she sobbed, "my husband. He died last night while we were having sex. He just collapsed." Stanley's heart pounded in his chest. "What? How? Are you sure?" he stammered, fear gripping him. "Yes," she cried. "We were together, and then he just stopped moving. I don't know what to do." Stanley hung up, his mind racing. The news brought a wave of terror crashing over him. If his friend who had sought protection in Benin had died this way, what hope did he have? Later that evening, Stanley sat in his living room, staring blankly at the wall. His wife noticed his distress. "What's wrong, Stanley? You look like you've seen a ghost." Stanley shivered at her choice of words. "I just got some terrible news about a friend," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. His wife sat beside him, holding his hand. "I'm here for you, whatever it is." Stanley nodded, but the fear inside him grew. He knew he couldn't keep lying to his wife forever. The ghost's presence loomed over him, a constant reminder of the danger he faced. He realized he needed to act before it was too late. Stanley knew he couldn't keep the truth from his wife any longer. That evening after dinner, he sat her down and took a deep breath. "I need to tell you something, and it's going to sound unbelievable." His wife looked at him with concern. "What is it, Stanley? You look so troubled." Stanley began to recount everything that had happened. The affair with the mysterious lady in the hotel, the dream sex, the bloody urine, and the warning the ghost had given them. His wife listened in shock, her eyes widening with every word. "I didn't know how to tell you," Stanley said, his voice shaking. "I was scared, and I didn't want to put you in danger. The lady's spirit has been visiting me every night, and she warned me not to sleep with you, or I'd face the same fate as my friend who died." His wife was speechless for a moment, trying to process everything. "Stanley, I don't even know what to say, but we need to do something. This can't go on." That evening, the lady visited Stanley again. He felt a cold shiver as she appeared beside his bed. She seduced him once more, and they had sex. Afterward, she warned him again. "Remember, Stanley, you belong to me now. If you try to sleep with your wife, you will suffer the same fate as your friend." The next morning, Stanley decided to take further action. He went back to the hotel and spoke with the manager. "I need to find the family of the lady who died in that room. Maybe they can help." The manager nodded and gave Stanley the contact information for the family. Stanley visited them, hoping for answers. He was welcomed by the grieving parents, who confirmed that their daughter had indeed died tragically in the hotel. "We've tried everything to bring her peace," her father said, showing Stanley pictures and videos of her funeral. Stanley shared his ordeal with them, and they were sympathetic. They performed the spiritual rites together, hoping to finally put the spirit to rest. But every night, Stanley was still visited by the mysterious lady. The bloody urine continued, and the pain in his penis grew unbearable. He started losing weight rapidly, becoming gaunt and traumatized. After seeing her family, things took a turn for the worse. Stanley's encounters with the ghost became more intense and terrifying. Sometimes he would wake up in the middle of the night to find himself lying on the dead lady's grave. This happened multiple times, and on some nights he would drive his car to the cemetery and spend the night on her grave without understanding how he got there. These incidents began to affect Stanley emotionally and mentally. His sleep was constantly disturbed, and he was plagued by vivid nightmares. On one occasion, he left his car at the cemetery and couldn't remember where he'd parked it for an entire week. His friends and family grew increasingly worried about his well-being. The torment from the spirit was relentless. Stanley felt trapped and desperate for help. He knew he couldn't continue living this way, with the ghost of the lady controlling his actions and haunting his every moment. The psychological and emotional toll was becoming unbearable. Now Stanley found himself in a desperate state, seeking help from one place to another. Despite the previous rituals and spiritual interventions, the torment from the ghost had left deep scars on his psyche and body. He kept losing weight at an alarming rate, and the blood in his urine continued to be a frightening reminder of the ghost's lingering presence. He visited numerous healers, pastors, and spiritualists, hoping to find a permanent solution. Each offered their own methods and assurances, but nothing seemed to completely rid him of the ghost's influence. Stanley's days became a blur of consultations and rituals, and his nights were filled with dread, fearing another haunting visit. As we conclude Stanley's harrowing story, it leaves us with many questions. Was there something Stanley was hiding in his account? Why did he and his friend not stop having sex when the lady unexpectedly appeared? To all the men watching, be mindful of who you choose to sleep with. There are many scary and unexplainable things in this world that can have lasting impacts on your life. Always think twice and protect yourself from potential dangers. Please share where you are watching this story from in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to A Nancy Web of Tales for more intriguing stories. Stay safe and stay informed.